Okay, so now I have the primer coat on the top. We're going to let this dry, and then I will coat the top with the bed liner paint, Rust-Oleum bed liner, also brushed on. I think it looks pretty good, hell of a lot better than it did with just the caulk, and the surface is maintaining some texture. I wanted that for grip. I didn't want it to be slippery. Okay, so I've cut this first piece of subfloor to go over the metal. I'm going to be riveting these down. I'll countersink the rivet heads so that they're not going to be in the way when I do the flooring. But this first piece is in place. Next thing I'm going to do is get a curved piece cut, and then I'll draw a line underneath for this edge, and it will also cover the sharp part of that track. Alright, so I've got that piece cut. I'll probably have to glue a little piece in here. I'm actually planning on doing a wide angle iron trim over the edge of the stairwell at the end. It'll cover over this as well, although I may notch it around. But anyway, I'll have room to fill this in with a little bit of wood. So 2 pieces in. Once I've got them all assembled and put in place, then I'll drill holes and get it situated for riveting. And I'm going to caulk the edges and so on. So anyway, I'm going to keep at it. Alright, so I've cut these middle pieces of subfloor, and this one here, I drew a line at the bottom for the stairwell. I'm going to cut that out, and then I'll use that shape to help make the wooden stair tread here. Alright, there it goes. I have shimmed underneath with some 14 gauge because of putting this piece of 14 gauge in the middle long ago. That'll keep these from being wobbly. So it's coming along nicely. So we got that piece cut. Now we're going to do one that's 48 inches long, I believe. I got to take the measurement to cover this. It's going to be 8.5 wide. I'm going to move all this crap out of the way. Alright, so we have these pieces cut. Now I've just got to do these corners 1 and 2, and I'm just going to put a square piece up and mark the lines, and then I'm going to pattern these steps. I'll take a measurement and then I'll get them figured out. Okay, so I got the floor pieces cut. I'm going to fill this in with some wood filler once I've got things fastened down. That'll be fine. I didn't want to cut a whole new piece of wood just to make this long enough. So, and then I got this tiny piece, so we'll just rivet one rivet in there and a couple in here. Now at this point what I need to do is find some 14 gauge to shim under this with, and then I need to sanity check under the bus. It's very soupy out, before I put the rivets in, just to make double sure that there's nothing I'm going to hit like a line or anything going close to the metal. I'll have to wait for a dry day to do that. Okay, so I've just cut some more 14 gauge shims or spacers to make sure the flooring is even. They're going to go under where the rivets go. At least that's my intention. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to drill holes for the rivets. That way I can make sure the shims are under there. And I did actually manage to check under the bus. I did that by using my camera with the flash. It dawned on me I could just stick my arm under there and take a picture. Smartphones are pretty helpful. And not have to get into the slop. It's been raining here today and it's very muddy. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and get started laying out the holes. It's safe to drill, so we'll do that. And then I'll probably cut these stairs as like one of the last things I do tonight. Now that spacer 14 gauge with the tape stuck on it, I'm going to caulk around where the air vent hole used to be and stick that down in place. I'm also going to slip it under the rail to help support the rail. Alright, so I used some caulk there. There really shouldn't be any spray coming up because the tires are way behind that, but it'll keep air out, hopefully. That's the thought anyway. So I'm going to put this plate of metal over it. So the next thing I'm going to do here is fill this crack around the driver area with spray foam. Okay, so I'll let that cure and then I'll scrape the excess off. Okay, so I've drilled for the first few rivets here. Got them countersunk. I'm going to go ahead and get the compressor here hooked up. And got to find a compressor hose for the riveter. Okay, so I've started riveting. It's working well. I'm sinking them fairly deep. I might want to not put them quite as deep so they grip better. But so far so good. Alright, so my drill bits are giving up on me. I got to get some new cobalt bits to finish this. This is where I'm going to quit for tonight. But I got these first two pieces riveted down. I'll use some self-tapping hex head screws as well. Because of the problems I was having with the drill bit, but I'd much rather have them riveted. So, anyway, I'm going to continue with this next time. So, the next step here is to put the bed liner on. This paint's definitely dried. I haven't been here for like 5 days, probably 6 days. But anyway, I'm going to brush this bed liner on. Let that dry. While it's drying, I'm going to go into the bus and finish putting flooring down. After that, I'm going to start putting this garage floor down with vinyl adhesive. I'll have to cut it to exact shapes, carefully measured. So right now I'm continuing with the drilling and countersinking of rivet holes here. I had to get some new cobalt bits. The ones I had were a little dull. So anyway, I am continuing with this. I'm going to get the rest of the rivets in the floor. After that, I believe I'll put a little bit of wood filler in the recesses. After that, we'll be able to glue down the vinyl flooring. So that's the plan. Okay, at this point I've got the subfloor down everywhere. I'm going to run the sander over this and then I'll vacuum it up. After that, I'll be able to cut pieces of the garage floor PVC flooring. And I'm going to start in the center here and glue it down. I'll cut pieces that match the treads here. Actually, it just dawned on me, and I still need to cut wood for the treads, so that's going to happen before I glue it down. But I am going to get the PVC flooring in place on this level. After that, I've got the platform drying. I'll be able to get these rails secured. I've drilled the 1/4 holes. I'm going to ream those out once the 25/64 drill bit comes. I've got some riv nuts, and that's what I'm going to put in place to secure these two L tracks. It'll be riv nuts through the steel, quite a few on each, so that'll be good and secure. So that's the game plan. Okay, so what I've done here is build a little bit of a cardboard template with some tape. I find that templates are far more useful than measurements. They result in a better fitting result. So anyway, we're doing it that way. I'm going to go in and draw out some lines with a Sharpie on the wood that I've cut to 8 3/4 here. So I'll work from the front edge because that's the more important edge. Alright, so I used my first pattern and built the step here. Next I'll build the one for the lower step. Okay, so right here I used the template to trace the lines. Now I'm going to go use a jigsaw to cut the stair tread out. There we go. Second tread is in place. So I think what I'm going to do now is rivet these down, and then I'll start making measurements for filling in the side of the stairwell. I don't think I'm going to put wood on the front of these treads. That'll just be painted. With truck bed liner. But I am going to put wood over these sections, in part to cover up this hole. So we'll see what we got here. So at this point I've taken measurements, and I'm going to be cutting this this flooring. It's a little more gray than black. I'm not sure why I thought it was black, but I may have even ordered it gray. I can't remember now, but I think it'll look good. The plan here is to come back next time and cut these pieces very carefully to fill in the flooring areas, glue them down, and so on. I'll probably run a sander over the wood a little bit in the bus just to kind of clean things up before I put the glue down. But definitely got enough flooring here for the cab area. So I just went to Tractor Supply. I got some steel and other stuff to mount the chairs. Now I'm going to go ahead and work on the floor. I'll have to take this to my drill press at home to drill the holes in the right spots. I also have to dress some angle iron and get it fabricated, welding it to these steel tubes. So anyway, I do have a plan to get the chairs mounted to the swivels. Alright, so I threw all the stuff in the back of the car. I'm going to be able to use my drill press and maybe the welder, depending on what I decide to do. But I actually think these tubes can go across here and actually still meet the holes on this frame. And then I'm going to use the all thread right here. The all thread will make it height adjustable by increasing the spacing between the tube and the base here. So I'll have to adjust all four corners, but I don't expect we're going to adjust it very often, and my wife and I are about the same height for driving. So anyhow, I'll have to take this home, but I'm still working on the bus before I do that. I'm going to get some construction adhesive filling the holes where I put the rivets inside. Alright, so my construction adhesive was all dried up in the tubes from having sat out here for a year or two. So that didn't work, but I did use some caulk. This is acrylic caulk. I will, once it dries, I will go ahead and sand the top here, and then I'll be able to put the flooring adhesive down and get the flooring cut to shape. So the flooring is like a dark gray garage floor vinyl, and once it's glued down, it certainly isn't coming up. So that'll be fairly waterproof. When I permanently seal the strips to the steel, these aluminum airline tracks, to get those permanently sealed, I'm going to put caulk underneath them so that they end up making a waterproof barrier, and then I'll just swipe the caulk along the edges. So that'll happen before I put the flooring down. So I've got to locate my riv nut tool, which I have no idea where it's at right now. Could be at home, could be around here somewhere, but got to dig for that. And then I'm going to put some rivet nuts into the steel. I've got the holes pre-drilled through the track, so that'll be the next thing I do, is to permanently fasten the airline track down with caulk on the inside of it. Hopefully it'll squish out at the top here, and I'll just swipe the caulk bead down. So that is the plan. So before I take off this evening, I'm going to put some truck bed liner on the sides of the stairwell. I probably won't be covering those with wood, I don't think. That hole is actually going to have a stairwell light. I'll reuse the hole. So I think that's the best answer. I'm going to go ahead and just paint it with the bed liner. Okay, so this first coat looks kind of ugly. It'll get smoothed out as I add coats of bed liner. So anyhow, I'm going to sand the wood before I put the glue down, and this will probably get probably three coats of bed liner. I also did this edge going up. So anyhow, that's my alarm telling me I got to go pick up my daughter. Alright, so I've cut these steel pieces with my metal cutting saw, and I've made some marks, checked it on the seats, and then so this will be the bolt here, not this mark but that one. I'm going to pilot that. That'll be the bolt for the van seat. That actually these are for like like 2015 Ford Explorers, I believe is what these were intended for, these seats. But I'm going to drill pilot there for the seat bolts. This crosshair here is for the 8-inch distance from here to here for the swivel, and I'll have a spacer using all thread to adjust the height of the seat with 3/8 all thread and 4 nuts and lock washers, so that'll let us adjust the height. But anyway, I'm going to drill 4 holes in each of these. I have 4 of them, and I'll get started with that. Making progress here. I'm using a 7/16 inch bit. Got one more hole to drill in this first one. Then I will test fit that, make sure both sets of holes line up. If that's good, then I'll use it as a guide to do the rest of them. Okay, so this first one looks like it works okay on this one. What I'll do is I'll just remount the holes a little bit by clamping these down when I do the installation. Now I just need to check the line that up. So that's through the hole. That's through the hole. Good enough. Now I need to check for the actual seat to make sure the bolts go through those holes. Alright, I have the seat in the back of the car here, and it looks like success. Those holes work just fine. So I've got it right. This one's going to be the pattern for the rest. So tonight's order of business is riv nuts on this track to get the track into the floor, and then I'm going to put track over here for the driver's seat as well. I think I'm going to do that after I lay flooring in there, so it's under the airline track. But anyhow, I may have left my pilot bit at home, so I'm going to run to town here because it's close and just get another 23/64 bit, and then I'll get started getting these tracks mounted. Alright, went and got my drill bits. Now I'm going to get started on these tracks. So what I'm doing right here is getting the driver's seat mocked up on the bolts. Then I'll create the correct spacing with a piece of wood between those two rails, and then I'll fasten it on the center line that I drew over here. This will let me get some adjustment of the overall seat front to back. So that's the plan anyway. It won't be super easy to do. I'll actually have to remove the seat. I won't be able to slide it because of the way that I didn't weld the fastening rings to the bracket like I did for my wife's chair, the copilot chair. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and fasten this down, take a measurement, cut a piece of wood as a spacer, and then I'll be able to put it over here and get it set, drill the holes. I want to get all the riv nuts done at the same time. Got the wood spacers in place. I'm going to have to mark center lines front and back on the wood, and then I'll be able to position this on that line. I may need to extend my line a little bit right there. Also got to find my marker. I don't. Half the time on the job is spent looking for stuff because you misplaced it or aren't organized. At least with me anyway. Maybe some of you are better at your projects staying organized than I am, but that is not a strong suit of mine. Okay, so right here I have this lined up with my center line. At least almost lined up. That looks better right there. And then similarly back here, got a center line marked. So I'm gonna go ahead and maybe just mark a line along this side to well, no, I'll go ahead and drill some pilot holes or make some marks here so I can drill the holes. So that's what I'll do. On the holes I can see, I'm gonna use my pen and scribble in there and make marks. Alright, so I didn't film it, but I did my first nut insert here. These are stainless. I am going to need to use two that came with a rivet gun, or the riv nut tool, because I don't have quite enough. But anyway, it went okay. I just didn't force it. I need to figure out how to adjust the amount of pull with a full swing of the arms so I don't end up breaking the tool. I did encounter strong resistance. That's kind of where I quit. So I think it's pretty well secured. For some of the bolts, I'm going to go underneath eventually and put some nuts on the bolts to help, nuts and washers to help secure them. Just make sure double safe, because they will stick through these a bit. So anyway, I don't think it's a real need, but why not? So anyway, I'm going to keep going here, keep drilling the holes and putting the 8 here. Then I will connect this, make sure that's good, then I'll do the larger tracks. So I've got the 8 holes reamed out at the right size, and now I'm going to run the shop vac, clean up a bit, and put the rest of them in. So on this first one, I'm having a little bit of problem with precision. They're not quite perfectly aligned. It's going to take some doing to get these in there without breaking off the bolts. I'm probably going to put a little anti-seize on them to help them slide, and maybe get a ratchet. These are hex head bolts, so we'll see what I do. I've already got the riv nuts in place, but I learned a lesson here about the placing of the riv nuts. That the alignment, on these tracks is critical, and I free-handed the pilot holes on this, so that was a mistake. I did not do that on the longer tracks, so we'll see what I end up with, but hopefully I can get these put in. Alright, so to fix this problem of the alignment, I'm actually going to use just one drill bit, 1/64, I believe, larger than a quarter. I'm just using the first one that won't fit through the holes on the aluminum, and I'm just going to run those through real quick to give a little bit more leeway on the bolts, and that should give me the slack that I need to correct this mistake. So what I figured out here is that using the rivet nuts is going to be pretty difficult, at least on these. I'm probably going to end up removing that one, drilling out the difficult nut, and then I may even do two of them underneath that I can reach with typical nuts and washers and stuff from underneath. So trying to line up 4 holes. These were almost freehand. It's a bad idea. And I've already drilled the pilots for all 8 holes on that. So lesson learned is that you need to use the part to drill the holes for these airline tracks. They have to be precise. I'm hoping I have better luck on the longer tracks where I did actually drill the holes with the track secured using the spacing. Hopefully that'll be accurate enough. But once you use the nut cert, it clamps it down into place, and then any irregularities in the pilot holes become a challenge when you go to tighten these. These are with a small hex head, and at least with that, the force involved to get them to snug down is too great. So I am probably going to only use the rivet nuts where I'm not going to be able to reach from underneath, but I will have to crib up the bus and get under there and have somebody help me up top. This just isn't working out quite the way I had planned. I'm not sure how it'll go on these tracks, but hopefully I'll get enough rivet nuts secured where I know I can't access very easily from underneath due to close quarters. So anyhow, good plan, but execution's a little flawed here. So anyhow, I'm sure I'll lick the problem, but it'll take a little extra effort. Okay, so I managed to overcome this situation. I went out and got some ratchet hex keys, and so at this point I was able to snug these in. It's not perfect. This catches a little bit because the recess is not aligned properly, so you got a little edge of the bolt coming up, but for purposes of this driver's seat, it'll work out okay. I'm not going to be adjusting it very often. I'll have to be much more careful on the larger slides for the copilot chair. They definitely need to slide freely. So anyhow, I won't make the mistake of freehanding after the driver's seat. And when I enlarge the holes for the riv nuts, they'll be spaced properly, hopefully, on these larger ones. So I think this may still work out. So I'm back at the bus here. I've just made sure that the holes were aligned as best as I could to put riv nuts in these. I'm going to actually widen these to the right size. Might be tricky on this ridge. My plan is to use the riv nut tool from on top of this track so that I can align the bolts properly. We'll see how it goes. It's very tricky to do this. So mostly it matters right in here. For these other ones, I could go underneath the bus and easily put in some nuts to back the track, which I may end up having to do. We'll see. See how well this works. Alright, so I've got these bigger pilot holes drilled for the riv nuts. Now it's a matter of hoping the track aligns when I go to use a riv nut tool. I'm especially concerned with these ones because of this ridge making it a little difficult to drill in the center. I actually wallowed out some of these countersinks on the track with the original 1/4-inch hole. So much better if you can just drill a simple hole and drop the bolt down under. But here, I think that would be pretty difficult. So I definitely want the rivet nuts being used here. If I have to bolt from underneath for these, which is actually less likely because there's no ridges, then so be it. But anyhow, I'm going to try to get the rivet nut tool in the works here and align these holes properly. Alright, so I've dropped the rivet nuts in place. I think on these I'm going to need to support them from this side with some additional sheet metal. Maybe even wedge them over a bit with that sheet metal, just to kind of align them better. So, but I'm going to lay this track down and see how they line up visually. Maybe even just, try to start the threads gently of the fasteners in through these holes and see if everything's, for the most part, lined up visually before I start. Alright, so I was able to get all the threads started. Then I screwed these back in place to hold the rail. Now I'm going to use the rivet nut tool one at a time. And as I use the tool on each, I'm going to thread it down in and countersink it. And hopefully we get a nice fit. Hopefully these don't give me trouble, but we'll find out. Well, the first one sheared off on me. It was maybe a little misaligned. I may have used the rivet nut tool a little too hard. So not much I can do about that right now. I'm going to go ahead and get this one done a little more carefully. So I figured out the rivet nuts aren't going to work here. I'm going to end up, at least for this section, I'm going to end up drilling some holes through the metal here so I can get in there and hold the nut on the back with some needle nose pliers or whatever. So that's what we're going to have to do. And then I'll cover this with some decorative trim. So anyway, experiment failed. So this is not a good rivet nut application, quite honestly. I'm just going to have to get in there and put nuts on the back of these with washers. Probably be way more secure anyway, so probably a blessing in disguise. Okay, so because these rivet nuts weren't working, I did a little hole sawing here, and I've got a gap. Now here, a hole that I can put the nut through, and this will work. I'm going to do this for each of the holes, and then I'll be able to get underneath for the rest of it to reach those nuts. But here at the side of the stairwell in the back, it's very close. So I brutalized a couple of hole saws. That's why they're different sizes here. But drilled the holes, double thick here, metal. I had to go with a fairly small hole because I didn't want to ruin the integrity of that support there. I wanted to leave enough metal. As I started out with a much larger size and realized that was going to be a problem. So anyway, now I'm going to get this track, I'm going to clean up, and then I'm going to get this track put down and get the nuts in from the holes I just cut. So you might be wondering how I'm getting the washers and the nut and lock washer on these. What I'm doing is I'm putting a little tape on to make this hole smaller. I'm sliding this on first, and it's catching on the teeth of the bolt. And then I've got the nut and lock washer kind of taped a little bit as well, so I can still get it through, but it holds the washer in place with a little bit of electrical tape. A little bit of tape left on the end when we're done, but that really doesn't matter too much. So anyway, that's how you get nuts on in a tiny hole, at least one method. So I'm going to keep at it. Okay, so to crawl under the bus, I used some plywood that I let go to rot outside, just to cover the wet ground. Got some plastic, and I've blocked the frame, safety first. Never get under a vehicle without making sure it's blocked, in case the tires were to deflate or something. There's room under there. I probably wouldn't be crushed, but safety first. Well, as luck would have it, the place I need to access is within a box beam. That's no fun. So what I'm going to need to do is run the drill bit down through the track and make access holes, and then use the hole saw underneath to get in there with a socket to put the nuts on. This is not ideal in the least. It's quite a pain in the butt. It's right here in this this beam right here. Right here, this one. It couldn't be here where it's opened. Had to be right where it was closed off. Yay. So the other option is to continue with rivet nuts, which I probably will do instead, since those holes were a little more regular. I'll undo what I just did, and enough to slip rivet nuts in the holes, and then we'll do it that way. But this is not what I was hoping for. So back at the bus here, I got most of the front rail bolts done yesterday evening. I'm going to have to undo what I just did here. I've got to get rivet nuts under there because of the box beam being in the way. So I already locked these down. I'm going to have to loosen them, possibly fully remove them to get the rivet nuts in place. I may not have to take them all the way off, which would save me some trouble. If I can slip the rivet nuts in and then use the tool through the track, that'll help align them as well. So that's what I'm hoping I can do. We'll see. Okay, so I've been installing these rivet nuts. It's coming along. Okay, so I got the rivet nuts in, and I got them all fastened down on this most difficult track. I have these bolts to redo with the electrical tape like I did last time. And then I'm going to see if I have, I might have run out of the countersink bolts. I got some more on order. I need 4 more to finish that side, and then over here at the driver area I need probably 6 maybe to finish that. So we'll see what I have. I do have another style. They're a different thread pitch. I might use those instead. Okay, I've tied it up a little bit here, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually remove these rivet nuts. Decided to through bolt this, probably with a back plate. So I'm going to drill these out, and next I'm going to sand this area lightly, and I'm going to cut a piece of the flooring to go down. I'm going to have to remove the pedals, get the flooring underneath that. This will need to be cleaned up a little bit. I'll probably put paper down afterward and just do it after I put the flooring in. Well, maybe I'll do it now if I find a wire brush. Actually, probably would make sense to hit it with a little paint before I put the flooring down. Not sure. Yeah, no, I'm just going to wire brush it, and then I'll brush paint it with black Rust-Oleum and paper underneath. But anyhow, the idea here is I'm going to put the flooring down, and then I'll use the through bolting once the snotty weather clears up to put the airline track in for the driver's seat. But I want to get that flooring down along with on the wood. I'm going to sand and use vinyl adhesive to glue the flooring to the plywood all through the cab area. So I took the foot pedal assembly out as best I could. Hit it with the wire brush here. Eventually I'll probably put some either POR 15 or some rust converter on it and then paint it. But for now I'm just trying to get this flooring down. I can protect the flooring with paper when I do that. But next step here is going to be to scuff up this paint with a sander, and then I'm going to vacuum and cut the piece for the driver position. So what I'm doing right now is cutting the piece for the driver area out of this garage floor vinyl. This is G floor. It's a 5x10 roll, I believe. 10 foot, might be 5x8, but it's big enough for the area. So carefully cutting pieces. This one's, like I said, going to the driver area. I'll have to further trim it with scissors once I get it in there. So I'm using this tool my wife bought me. I'm sure you've seen it on TV. Worked pretty good for this corner so far. I've got it lined out there without having to really measure. So I'm going to cut that corner, and I'm going to cut a slit here to go around. Over there it'll be hidden, and kind of marked a little circle for the brake pedal and the gas pedal well. So at this point I'm going to go ahead and make some cuts and keep fitting it. Okay, so I've got that slit cut, I've got the corner cut. I'm sure I'm going to have to cut some more to fit it, but hopefully I did well and I didn't waste $100 on this garage floor. Okay, with any luck this will fit like a glove. I also had to cut out a hole for the steering gear, steering rod. Okay, so I'm not mad at that. There's going to be some black caulk at the edges and then some trim. In most of it anyway. This will be hidden by a shroud, the gear. That'll look better once it's cleaned up and fastened down. So that's pretty good. I'm going to trim this and then I'll be gluing it in place. Alright, so I've got this piece trimmed. Now I'm ready to put down some adhesive and stick it to the metal. Alright, so that's where I'm going to finish up today. I've got the vinyl flooring adhesive under there, gluing it down. Got the cans kind of putting some weight on it with the boards. We'll let that dry and then I'll be ready to mount the seat rails and likely paint that piece of metal there as well. Alright, so this result is fair. Of course the seat brackets will hold this part down good, but everything stayed fairly flat with the weight that was on it. Some glue squeezed out over there. I'm going to have to wipe that off. But anyway, pretty good result all in all. I'm back at it here. It's been a little while. The temperatures have dropped. This is the first day about freezing for a while, so I'm out here kind of positioning these tracks again, finding the holes that are under the flooring. I've got the first two there. I'm going to start slipping these bolts down in. It's kind of soggy and whatnot. I may not get under the bus to tighten these tonight. I'm not sure. But anyway, I'm going to get the holes, or get the pieces shoved through, or the bolts shoved through the flooring, so they're dipping down below the plate. And then I'm going to see, well, maybe I will get under there with some light and try to get these snugged up, but we'll see. Alright, so I've got the block in the middle and the seat as the spacer. Now I'm going to go underneath and tighten up bolts with some lock washers. So here I am under the bus. I was able to get 6 of these bolts fastened for the seat. I used fender washers and lock washers. These are stainless. The fender washers, I believe, are also stainless. The lock nuts are not. I couldn't find any 1/4 inch stainless lock nuts at Tractor Supply. But I've got 6 of the 8 bolts. The 4th one in each is actually buried in this crease. Don't know if we can see it or not, but there's no way to get to it. It's going to be decorative, but 6 bolts ought to hold the rails just fine, even as fat as I am. So anyway, I'm going to get out from under the bus. It's not exactly a comfortable place at 43 degrees outside. So the order of business today is to sand the wood here and get the rest of the vinyl put down. We've got a rare day that's warm enough for the glue here in late November after Thanksgiving. And I'm going to start by cleaning up the mess and revealing the wood below and getting the sander going. Got it all cleaned up here, and now I'm going to start sanding. I got some fresh 80 grit on the sander. The idea here is just to get all the gunk up from me tracking stuff in and caulk residue. Get a little bit of fresh wood for the glue to stick to. Alright, so I got the sanding done. I do have one spot here where this was a little bit proud. I've sanded it down as much as I can without getting into another layer. So I'm not sure why that is. Probably the surface where I put the 14 gauge strip earlier in the process is lifting the plywood up just a little bit. I don't think that'll be that noticeable. I'm just worried about sliding the slide and it catching the vinyl. Hopefully that's not an issue. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and clean up here, and then I'll start cutting vinyl pieces to size. So I've got this center piece rough cut. I'm laying it down. I'm going to mark the edges here of the stairwell. It's going to end right there at the edge of the railing, right here. I cut it just about an 1/8 inch wide. I'm going to trim that end with the razor blade against the rail to make it fit nice. So right now I'm going to mark some additional cuts, and we're going to use this piece here, what's remaining, to cover the stair treads. So I got to be pretty careful about this part. Alright, so you might be able to see in the video I've scribed a bit of a line here. It meets here. This is where the stairwell was, and then that odd shape on the edge. So I'm going to use my straight edge and cut this piece now. Alright, so that piece is down. Messed up a little bit here, but the trim's going to cover that. so not a real big deal. So anyway, next I'm going to cut the piece for the stair tread, or mark it for cutting right here. Then I'll get this one and that one done. Okay, so I've covered that tread. Now we're going to move on to this one. And the other stair tread. Not perfect, but again, the trim will hide it. So I'm going to be using metal stair tread with ridges, most likely, to make it more non-slip on the edges and to hold things down. So that's the plan anyway. Okay, so that piece is cut enough to glue down. I'll run the razor after it's dried along the edge again to make it perfect. Now I'm going to move on to this piece here. Then I'll be ready to glue stuff down. So when I first demolished the bus, I actually saved this piece knowing that it would be useful when I laid a flooring piece. Now I'm going to use it as a template for this last cut. And then we'll have it extra. It'll be a little long, and then I'll trim it to fit the track once I have it set in. Okay, so I've got this last piece cut. I'll get it glued down, and then I'll trim the track a little bit better. So at this point, got all the pieces in place. Just need to glue them down. So before I put the glue down, I've masked these tracks with duct tape. I'm going to use a razor to trim them at the edge. And that'll keep the flooring adhesive from sticking to the aluminum. So at this point I've got the glue down and some boards weighting things down, at least where I need it to stick the best in the walking areas and whatnot. So anyhow, this will cure over the next few days and then we'll be in good shape. Just going to double check my treads, make sure they didn't move on me. Yeah, those are okay. So that's it for the evening. At the bus here, a couple days later, I am going to remove the weight and check these floors and remove that tape from the tracks. See how we're looking. Hopefully the glue cured enough that the floor is good and stuck. Okay, so this looks pretty good. Now I'm going to pull this tape off the track. Alright, so to get some of this tape up, I need to get my razor knife and cut along the track and trim back the flooring as I intended to do. Unfortunately, I left my good razor knife at home, so I was just planning on checking on this and pulling the tape for now, so until next time. Today's plan for the bus is to mount the seats, driver and passenger. Kind of get the feel for how they fit and make sure the driver's seat is able to achieve a comfortable position for driving and get some adjustments made on it. And then eventually here I'm going to acquire some aluminum and trim everything out in aluminum that'll kind of match the color of the airline track. So that's what's on the agenda today. Alright, so I got the seat all bolted together here. After I fit the length, I may trim some of this excess bolt off with the angle grinder, to be determined. All thread, I mean. But anyway, I've got this assembled. So we've got some bolts in through there holding this on. And then this is where the height adjustment gets made. I will probably use the extra bolt here, the length, to hang like a dust ruffle or something for hiding the machinery. Maybe a piece of black cloth or something. Just to make it more appealing visually. So anyway, I'm going to take this to the bus and lock it down and see how it feels relative to the steering wheel. So I got the driver's seat positioned. What I figured out is that it's just a little tall. I think what I'm going to do is take the two nuts out of the base below the square tubing. Take those two nuts out to lower it a little bit, and that might be just what I need. Otherwise I might have to buy a different base that's a little bit shorter, maybe a 4-inch base, and then adjust the height. So to be determined how I resolve that. It's just a little bit awkward. It's also not going to swivel. It's really not going to swivel because the panel behind it is a little bit too close So that's not going to work quite the way I envisioned, but oh well. So I just fastened the seat base down, the sled as I call it, on the rails. Now I'm going to mount the seat for the passenger, or copilot. Alright, so I've got the driver's seat in position. I will need to take it back out and redo the base a little bit to drop it down. Also got this passenger seat in place, or copilot seat. It's on the sled here. That sled is locked into the airline track. Oh, little wrench there. But I can use the adjustments down here on the rod to change the height to my wife's liking. So anyway, the sled is not super easy to move. I've got to think a bit, maybe call the company that makes the airline track, see if they have ideas. I may want to modify the mechanism a little bit. Wondering if I can't put some HDPE in underneath between the bolts as sort of a mechanism to keep things sliding nicely. I've got to talk to them. But anyway, it is kind of like I envisioned it to begin with, just a little bit hard to adjust. It's likely once we hit the road, we would probably find a happy medium position for this. And kind of leave it in one spot most of the time. I can go ahead and get in the bus. It's not super convenient, but I can step up here to get in. And then I'll also show that I can spin this chair around here and make it a little bit easier to get in the bus, so I'll do that. The way the chair is twisted right there, spun around, it actually could be an extra seat to watch a show over here. I'd have to slide the eventual door that way, or open the door. But this chair can spin 360 without bumping anything, so that's kind of handy. We'll get it spun back around and locked in place. Okay, there it goes. So anyway, I'm pretty pleased with this all in all. A little bit concerned with the slide track method. It's heavy, it catches. And the biggest issue really is that the parts that go in the track tend to come out of the track. So I'm wondering if it's possible that if they have one that's more than one slot long, I may talk to the company and see if I can get a length of the insert with the bolt that traverses slides through with more than one of the gaps. What I'm saying is they're only that long. I want one that's longer so it stays in the track when I slide the platform. So it's not ideal, but it's it's a fair best answer for what I know how to do. So it's certainly going to be safe and secure when it's locked down. Alright, let's get a little paper behind the seat there. I'm going to put over it when I shut the door because of the snow. But anyway, there's the base from this angle. Seat in position. It's slid a little bit back. It'll go further forward. These seats also recline. So anyway, it'll take a little bit of fiddling to make a height adjustment on the driver's seat, but I think I'll call this a success. I've yet to get the aluminum trim. I'm going to fill in this with 1/4-inch ply and then a sheet of aluminum. Everything in the front here is getting trimmed in a gray aluminum just like the rails. I'm going to get some sheet aluminum, have it sheared and bend my own thin angle as trim pieces, and then sheet aluminum will decorate the the dashboard area there, and probably the walls in the cab. When I build a bookshelf, I'll probably trim that out in aluminum. I may even trim the ceiling out in some aluminum. Right now I've just got some screws in it, but I'll have kind of an industrial look here in the cab. And like I said before, I'll be using some black fabric to build sort of like a dust ruffle around the bottom of the seats to hide the metal, the supports. So anyway, that's where we're gonna we're going to quit with this two-part series on outfitting the driver area for now.